All right. Hey, audio. Okay, we'll fix this. Fix it in post, but okay, it's fucking live. Normally, I don't comment on this shit because it's a waste of my time. But I've had like 5 people, 10 people share this either in groups or like to me personally in the past day or on Twitter or some shit like that. And it's honestly the dumbest shit. I have to read this and it's almost if as if 2017 happened. And yes, there was a bubble in 2017, and most of the crypto that was in that period went to zero. That's true. But there's also a lot of winners and losers, a lot of winners as well too. And there's a lot of economic activity which has been taking place. And so if you still hold the same positions as 15, 16, 17, when the landscape was very different as to now, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think you're blinding yourself, obviously, to what's happening right now. So I want to go through this. I think he's an idiot, and we're going to discuss why. Steven. First of all, this Steven dude already blocked me on probably for good measure. He's one of those dudes that like just blocks everybody on Twitter. Let's go look him up. Let's go find his thing. So like I read on Twitter a couple of days ago that the guy works as a, let's see, he's a software engineer. All right, let's see where he works for, right? Dude's got a bachelor in science from Boston University, right? So he's a mid-level computer science major from a mid-level university. Right? Writes some open source stuff. Okay. Core developer at Blaze. Blaze is the next generation of NumPy. Python's extremely popular array library. So I'm pretty sure that like he has some, what is Continuum? It's called Continuum now. He hasn't updated this. Continuum is a global innovation design consultancy. Working with Zinfi, yeah, Revolution. Okay, it sounds like nothing. I mean, this honestly, like, this website sounds like it does nothing. That's the future made real. This is again, people should really like. Okay. All right. So consultancy offerings. Okay. So offerings, they do data consultancy. Probably will be displaced by, okay, right? Ethnographic, physiological, and psychological research to define the product strategy that maximizes value for a specific group of consumers. So he's working with complex design systems. It sounds like his business is going to be displaced by a lot of what's happening. Do people really need growth strategy consultants like this guy? Anyways, I don't want to get too much on his job. So let's just focus on this article. Inane article. Okay, he's talking about how he has to talk about crypto assets, their destructive force, and he support forceful regulation to halt this financially corrosive enterprise from spreading in further into markets. What does it even mean? Like, okay. Same basic monetary theory, American history, and technical limitations. Okay, so the technology does not solve a real problem. I'm going to disagree with that. So the crypto project has 13 years to find a problem to solve. It's not found one. Well, it's solved a bunch, right? Crypto at its core is providing economic services to those at the margins, especially in gray areas where it's either distasteful or a industry which is not able to get banking services. I mean, you see this in the pornography industry, in the firearms industry, maybe even oil at some point. One of the first use cases for using Bitcoin that got a lot of people on was when PayPal dropped them and and WikiLeaks started taking Bitcoin donations. So when the payment processors, and we see this a lot now, more nowadays, right? With people being canceled left and right, people being removed from banks because they don't want to have any association with somebody because they're politically distasteful. It's up to crypto at that point to provide a service, and that's a real problem, right? When you have people at the margins losing banking services, people at the margins who are not able to access dollars through capital markets, say in Argentina or Venezuela or other places where dollar controls are strict. You know, there's access that you can get through cryptocurrencies to be able to get into dollars, which is great, and evade capital controls in strict companies, in strict countries. So I think that's a real problem that it solves. Okay. So I think that part of Stephen's, and we'll get into this, I think part of his like narrow-minded, myopic view of cryptocurrencies comes from him being like a solely US based person and not having to deal with any sort of issues like this outside of the United States. You know, it's one thing to like drone on about securities regulation, but it's another to displace an entire person's or an entire people and their problems that they have, and that cryptocurrencies solve for them, just because you're an American and you don't want to take a non-global view of all this. So the real world has fundamental constraints that make technology unworkable, whatever that means. Like no examples. Whenever it has to interact with the outside world, the benefits of decentralization disappear and the solutions end up simply recreating slower and worse versions of processes and structures that already exist. I think this is partially correct, but again, we're talking about the margins. We're talking about where existing services are not available. And so cryptocurrencies fill that gap, just plain and simple. So I'm sure a lot of people in Venezuela or in Argentina or in other places where there's strict dollar capital controls would love to get access to dollars, would love to have a dollar bank or some sort of like dollar account that they could fund and sell all their shitty currency to. So they're not experiencing high levels of inflation in their national currency. But you can't. I mean, in Argentina, I think you can only swap up to $500 at a time, which is insane. So despite that, for the last 13 years, these projects have done nothing but scam people by creating synthetic asset bubbles for gambling and destroying the environment. Not really. I mean, it's one thing to say that, like, sure, some people speculate, but a lot of other people invest. There are fundamental limitations to the scalability of blockchain-based technologies. Never use case is better served by another simpler technology, except for crime, ransomware, extra-legal gambling, and sanctions evasion. I mean, there's more that happens than crime, ransomware, extra-legal gambling, and sanctions evasion. And all of these are controlled through strict AML measures. I mean, I work in an exchange, and guess what? We have a very strong compliance and AML team. We have AML training. We work with governments if they have investigations that they're conducting, and I'm guessing most every exchange, at least the legitimate ones, are working with a partner like Chainalysis, who's doing on-chain analysis of crypto transactions to see if the money potentially was involved in some sort of sanctions evasion or money laundering, right? Everybody has to be KYC when you come in and out. So I think this is a bit, again, short-sighted. Like, this dude doesn't actually work at a crypto company. He doesn't understand the compliance that actually exists and is implemented at this point, which is pretty strict. And it's not just one jurisdiction. It's all jurisdictions that you have to comply with when it comes to regulations. So yes, there is ransomware, there is crime, there is extra-legal gambling, and there is sanctions evasion, but that also exists with dollars as well too. So, it's not like his argument holds any water versus any other currency that exists. Um, Taken as a whole, the technology has no tangible benefits over simply using trusted parties and centralized databases. Well, that's not exactly true. He probably hasn't used most of DeFi yet. The ability for me to take a loan at 0 or -% and, have that in an instant without any credit checks just by putting up my collateral, it's pretty awesome. And you can't do that with centralized databases. It takes time and there's regulations around that. Crypto coins are simply speculative gambling products that only create a massive set of negative externalities in the world. Well, which coins, right? Do you lump stable coins into this? Do you lump the like commodities tokens? So like when you have Pax Gold or something like that. I think he just, he's so myopic about thinking about Bitcoin, or just like Bitcoin, that everything else that's come after that is just, moot. It's like the guy hasn't even, he read the fucking Bitcoin standard back in, 2015, and thought it was dumb. Well, I thought the Bitcoin standard was dumb as well too, and I don't agree with it, but, I'm not out here negating an entire economic, like an entire economic sector just because I don't agree with their monetary policy. So the volatility is introducing artificial volatility into markets untethered to any economic activity, and creates an enormous opportunity cost when the only investment opportunity is an economically corrosive synthetic hedge against all productive assets. Okay, let's break this down. Artificial volatility. What exactly is that? Artificial volatility. So there is only volatility because if the speculative asset, you're just like Bitcoin, right? Purely speculative asset, commodity, you can say. The volatility is not artificial. It's just because there's low float and high demand for it, and because of the low float, it means that any large sales of 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 BTC are going to have a big impact on the market, and these markets are tethered to economic activity. I mean, people use dollar-based stablecoins on crypto networks all around the world to create economic activity. And it doesn't create enormous opportunity costs when the only investment is an economically corrosive synthetic hedge against all productive assets. See, this right here is Bitcoin maxi anti-talk. This is like anti-Bitcoin maxi shit talking, right? Bitcoin's not a hedge against synthetic all productive assets. That's not what it is. And if you think of it as a synthetic hedge or some sort of hedge against inflation or anything else, it's not what it is. I mean, there's narratives behind it, but again, it's not what it is. It's a free speech protocol. You can think of it like that, where the code is able to be freely spoken and freely transferred at, with no intermediaries who can stop that free speech from happening. Because code is speech at the end of the day. This is not innovation. Yes, it is. It's pure, unadulterated freedom of speech. And it's people like these that have an issue with it, right? They call it technical regression, flirtation with ecological disaster. It's like, again, all this surrounds Bitcoin. All this is about Bitcoin. None of this is about everything else that came after Bitcoin. So, and he lives in a 2017 world where Bitcoin is the only thing that ever exists, and there's no other things that have been built on top of any crypto platform. So what happens when, let's take Bitcoin out of the equation, right? Is it a technological regression? Some of the new stuff that's being built with zero knowledge proofs? Yes. The ZKP networks are going to be insane. There was no ZKP technology development really until, the Zcash came along. And now there's an entire field because people can make money off of it now. They can design these protocols that use zero knowledge proofs and turn them into billion-dollar protocols that people use. I think this is just dumb. This man is not a researcher. He's a mid-level coder who likes to write and has a blog and writes at like in a medium brow intellectual level that people somehow can think he's smart about what he's talking about, but he's not, because he doesn't use any of these products. He's a no coiner, right? And his pure focus is on Bitcoin when there's many other different avenues for him to take into account now, because it's not 2017 anymore. On pyramid schemes and dog memes, sure, man. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter whether people are buying doggy coins. Like, really doesn't matter. Like, you make a doggy coin, you let it go. Like, people are going to buy it. Like, consumer preferences are consumer preferences. Who are you to decide whether people should be able to access that or not? And this is, authoritarian in nature almost, because he thinks his consumer preferences are better than everybody else's. Okay, so so-called cryptocurrencies aren't actually currencies and cannot fulfill the function of money. I mean, okay, money exists to exchange goods and services in an economy. I can spend BTC, or I can spend crypto dollars or stable coins to buy shit. Like, what more do you want? I can put crypto onto a card, like a crypto.com card or a fold card or something, and buy shit with it. Like, it doesn't matter that it's not a dollar. It's created to mediate the exchange of goods so that we have a common unit account we can trade instead of bartering goods directly. Okay, like, we price everything in dollars, but there's other things that you can barter with. It's like barter with goods. Okay, great. But I have dollars. I can own Bitcoin, borrow against it, create dollars, and then use it, right? And then have my speculative asset that I like my high volatility with. Money needs to have a reliable and stable value compared to a domestic basket of common goods and services. In order to achieve that, the supply of the money needs to be controlled by a monetary authority, which can expand or contract the money according to market fluctuations. Sure, whatever. We're going to take basic monetary theory that's being used today and say, yeah, that's great. Money never really money rarely contracts in size. Only when you have credit degrowth or credit contraction will there be loss of money. But again, the monetary authority doesn't actually control the supply of money. So the central bank has no idea. Well, okay, let's roll through some stuff. The central bank has no idea how many dollars are in the world. That's a true statement, because while they may know the loan amounts for banks within the United States, they have no idea about the true size of dollar-based loans outside the United States and on the crypto markets as well too. I mean, that's pretty transparent. You can see how many dollar-based loans there are, but there's no way that the U.S. central bank can get a good eye on dollar-based loans in, say, a French bank to a Brazilian bank. That's just outside of their purview. And so they have no ability to affect those loans in the Eurodollar market. So again, this guy thinks that he understands money, but he doesn't, because he's an idiot. Okay. A dynamic money supply is a fundamental necessity for a modern economy. A small amount of inflation discourages hoarding and incentivizes investment. This is just basic shit about inflation, right? Conversely, a static fixed money supply encourages hoarding and is inflexible in times of crisis because it does not allow intervention. Sure, if your national supply of money, which you want to inflate or deflate, is fine. But again, like, the Bitcoin is not considered as, it's quasi money. It's a commodity, right? It's a fixed supply asset that people can buy and sell, right? Again, if you're just focusing on Bitcoin, sure, encourages hoarding. That's what Bitcoin's for. You want to acquire as much as possible because it's a fixed supply asset and other people want it. Economies do not stabilize themselves and require active intervention to curb recessions. Well, I mean, this is debatable. You ask a free market libertarian, they will say they stabilize themselves and do not require active intervention. It's only statists like this dude who can't even pick their nose without getting approval from the government that believe that economies do not stabilize themselves. Of course, they have to stabilize themselves. It's just mean reversion always happens. If you go too deep into recession, you'll always mean revert over a long enough period of time. If you go into high valuations or too much money creation, you're going to mean revert at some point once credit starts to collapse. So they do stabilize, right? And the ability, or at least the power of the central banks is questionable about whether they're actually the ones doing it, or if it's just a signaling process from them that encourages other banks and institutions to affect money markets. In an environment in which multiple currencies can commingle, there is a perverse incentive to create counterfeit currency or create parallel currencies. Is he talking about BCH and all the Bitcoin forks? Again, these are like 2015 comments, man. Like, counterfeit currencies dilute trust in commerce, create counterparty risk, and catalyze crime. Like, okay, but how does this apply to crypto? Parallel currencies introduce exchange risk and create artificial barriers to commerce. With any region, is thus have a single currency with a single authority to control the supply, protect against counterfeiting, lower barriers to commerce by discouraging others through creating. Yeah, that's true. They use the dollar, and they demand that it's required by citizens to pay their taxes to the state. I mean, like, okay, a state doesn't have to have a single currency or a single monetary authority, and it's not inevitable. It's a power grab by the state. We had multiple currencies in the United States for a long time. I don't really give a shit about this hard money stuff. I don't even want to talk about it because I think it's dumb to bring up. Hard money, soft money, it achieves different things. People are going for different things. You could think of hard money as an investment, while soft money is more of a tool, and that's how they're treated. Hard money people want. I mean, I guess the problem with hard money people is that, like, a dollar made 100 years ago, the hard money people think should be worth $1 today, even though there's a lot of time in between them. But the money as a tool people think that no, a dollar that you earned 100 years ago shouldn't have that retained purchasing power. I don't even touch this. Okay. Let's see. The United States ultimately devalued its currency. Policies of the New Deal, which slowly decoupled the dollar's dependence on gold. Yeah, sure. Conversely, Europe largely did not engage in these corrective policies. In this era saw the rise of populist strongmen and fascists who promised to correct the wealth inequality of the common man. Well, I'm sorry, Stephen. So if you're talking about fascists during that time, Germany was bankrupt, like absolutely bankrupt from the war, and put under huge amounts of debt. And so they devalued their currency. And that's what led to the rise of populist strongmen, is because of the hyperinflation of the 1920s and 30s inside of Germany. It brought about populists and fascists who promised to correct the wealth inequality because of the massive inflation that had taken place, and ultimately plunged the continent into the most violent period in human history. Yeah, as a result of unfettered inflation. So, again, like, his pseudo intellectual bullshit, it's sickening, that you're able to, like, twist small things, right, into, just bullshit and idiocracy. Money is always going to be inseparable from politics. Sure, I agree. I don't want to discuss this. This is dumb. Okay, look, the fixed supply ideas of deflationary currencies like Bitcoin fundamentally misrepresent the properties of fiat money as bugs when they affect features. They're trying to do two different things, right? So one is able to operate in a centralized ecosystem where you have a monetary authority that's able to make interventions. But in a decentralized environment where you can't trust anyone, the only thing that you can do is have a specific monetary policy, and it's very hard to change it once it starts. And with Bitcoin, it probably will never change. But with other things, Ethereum, sometimes they change it, but that's okay. You know, it's hard to do and it requires broad consensus to do it. Unlike the gold standard things where they devalued gold. Well, at first they collected all the gold and they devalued the gold in the United States during the 1930s. That wasn't broad consensus. I don't think people would have given up their gold had they wanted to. So state-controlled money embeds control and accountability for fiscal stability, market intervention, and democratic process where it inevitably and rightly belongs. No, like the Fed is independent of any democratic processes. It's a small board of people who are navigating the public's demands, business demands, and governmental demands for what the currency should be. History of private money is repeated disasters that destroys public trusts. I mean, part of the issue of the private money is that it could be easily counterfeited. But the main thing is that Bitcoin can't be counterfeited. ETH can't be counterfeited. None of the assets on there can be counterfeited. You know, most of this stuff is just like counterfeiting or like lack of fungibility between different assets, but we don't have that. You know, a dollar is a dollar is a dollar on crypto networks minus the swap fees. Wild tech platforms, they don't want to interface with public money. Yeah, they do. They want all the dollars. They want to become issuers of private money themselves. Well, in the case of Frax and other ones, yes, but you know, you need dollars in the first place. You need value to provide collateral in the first place. A fully vertical integrated form of company script that they will issue to their investors, employees, and customers to create not just a wall garden, but a wall garden where every path has a toll booth that takes only their coin. No. Like, you don't have to own any ETH. You can own USDC and take it on, I don't know, Solana. And with $5 a Solana and USDC on that platform, you can make thousands of transactions. Thousands. And I'm sure there's going to be platforms soon which will be gasless. And at that point, you know, what's this guy talking about? Like, no, you get dollars from USDC, which is held by Circle. Circle holds all of their collateral in short-term treasuries or cash, which means that they're very liquid. They can sell them into the market. And if people want to exchange all the USDC back for cash, they can. They can redeem that. Same for Paxos as well, too. Same for many of the crypto dollar platforms like Diehl and MIM. Well, maybe not MIM with the UST thing now, but MIM and other things. I mean, none of this is right when I read this. Private money regimes are just as exploitive. Like, most of this is just, you know, there's no basis in fact, right? And the so-called Web3 notion of embedding this form of institutional corruption as a first-class structure into the internet is a terrible idea that ignores the lessons of history. God, man, this guy should get out more, honestly. All right. When we logically crypto assets are all unregistered securities. No. Previous administration said they weren't. Bitcoin wasn't a security. Logically, when anybody says logically deconstruct, this is pseudo intellectual bullshit. I'm going to logically deconstruct this argument and show you that, like, this is what people try. This is what people write when they're trying to act smart. Logically deconstruct the crypto narrative by tossing out the phony populism and cult-like structure of faith and economic absurdities. So most of what he's doing here is trying to sound smart, right? But he's not actually saying anything because he has no factual basis in what he's talking about. We end up with an inescapable conclusion that it fits firmly within our existing regulatory framework. Does it? Because I've seen a lot of arguments for and back. I mean, One thing that this guy is not is he's not a lawyer. He's a mid-level computer executive, right? Writes some code, but he's not a lawyer. He hasn't gone to law school. And so this right here is just him armchair lawyering without a license. They've just synthesized their corporate equity and alleged notes into one financial product as wildcat banks. Is it really though? Like where's your legal precedent for this? Cryptocurrencies aren't cryptocurrencies and have no mechanism ever to become currencies. Where's your definition of currencies? I mean, this dude just spouts off bullshit, like trying to be smart. Honestly, there's little substance here, other than some like a lot of opinions and little substance. They are effectively unregulated securities where the only purpose of the products is price appreciation, untethered to any economic activity. Now, this is wrong, right? You go to Curve. Curve is a decentralized swap platform. You can swap Curve back and forth. You can swap dollars back and forth. You can swap different types of ETH back and forth. You can swap different types of BTC back and forth. So when you swap, let's say I'm going to swap USDC to Paxos, which in my opinion are very high quality stablecoins. They're fully backed by all of their collateral, and there's many millions, hundreds of millions of these. So there's a pool of stablecoins on Curve to swap from USDC to Paxos. So when I swap from USDC to Paxos, I pay two fees. I pay one fee to the network to process my transactions and find consensus about it. And then the second fee that I pay is to the protocol, which is Curve. And a bit of that goes back to the LPs, and then a bit of that goes back to the CRV stakers. So there is actual economic activity here because I'm swapping dollars for dollars and I pay a fee for it. That's not zero sum. And this is one thing that like this guy focuses so much on, but he's wrong, is that like everything in the crypto ecosystem is inherently zero sum by design, right? Exchanges are not casinos. If you go to Curve and you're swapping one type of dollar for another, or maybe you're going to be swapping euros for USDC, that's not a casino. Does that sound like a casino? That sounds like a foreign exchange market. It's not like the dude is taking a stance on foreign exchange markets, because that would be wrong, right? Those have economic activities, and most of what's happening in the stablecoin market mimics most all of what the foreign exchange markets are doing. So again, like pseudo intellectual bullshit written by some no coiner from 2017. Honestly, for cryptocurrencies to have any real utility, volatility needs to cool off. What does that even mean? What's a respectable level of volatility? Like, should it be more or less volatile than, say, Google? Should it be more or less volatile than, I don't know. I can go find than TQQQ, which is the triple levered NASDAQ. Should it have more volatility than that or less volatility than that? I didn't know that it was the job of securities regulators to regulate the volatility. If this dude can show me a reason why securities volatility should be regulated, fuck, man, I'll just give up. Show me where it says that asset prices cannot be volatile. Okay. If that were to happen, there'd be little reason for the public to speculate on cryptocurrency prices. Maybe not. Consumer preferences are always a certain way, but it's the design of a protocol that leads to the volatility inherent in it. Bitcoin has a fixed supply. It has a low float. Of course, it'll have high volatility. Does it matter? But I don't understand how the volatility matters here. Volatility on the long term, I mean, you can't have significant returns without high volatility. If you want low volatility, go buy the dollar. But people don't buy just dollars. They invest into commodities, which Bitcoin is. They invest into commodities, which Ethereum is. And they invest into other securities like Google and things, which have volatility. Sometimes it's high volatility. Sometimes it's low volatility. Sometimes Bitcoin has had low volatility for long periods of time. Sometimes it goes way up. But it's not like we put regulatory action against high volatility products. Sometimes we'll stop markets, but it doesn't mean that the volatility goes away. So again, like armchair mid-level CS graduate writing pseudo-intellectual bullshit. And this is why I don't read this stuff. So this is the inevitable fate of all cryptocurrencies, is to go to zero. Sure, on a long enough time scale, everything's going to zero, but it's not right now. We're at $1 trillion market or $3 trillion market. The median return on all of these thousands of flash in the pan coins is zero. Is it? Is it? I mean, if you take every single crypto in existence, is it? But he's really against Bitcoin. This is the thing where it's like, he talks about Bitcoin, and if he's just focusing on Bitcoin, I don't think he really has an argument to make. Every crypto coin is just on a random walk to zero by a different path. Are you sure? It's anybody that gives price predictions, even if it's zero, is wrong. They have no idea where the price is going. So again, only smart people, or not smart people, only dumb people trying to be smart, write shit like, the argument laid out in this article is quite a complicated edifice. This dude writes in this, like, again, pseudo-intellectual bullshit style where he provides zero evidence and writes in these like grand sweeping terms about an economy which he's not invested in, has zero exposure to, does not use on a day-to-day basis, has no idea what any of these projects do, has not seen any of the growth of stable coins, and quite frankly, he doesn't even concern himself with, and he just thinks it's a fraud. I mean, this is somebody who is able to sit behind his computer and write dumb shit because he's an idiot without putting the time and effort in to see what's actually happening here. Because we have securities. I can securitize a house and take out a Bitcoin, or take out either a Bitcoin loan, or I can take out a Diehl loan in a couple of days. That's economic activity. I can swap dollars to euros for very little slippage. That's economic activity. As a foreigner who wants to access dollar markets, I can do that. That's economic activity. So where exactly in 2021 is he getting these dumb arguments for? I don't know. These guys aren't building a financial system. They're just lining their own pockets. Bro, I am able to take a negative interest rate loan against pretty much any asset that I have immediately with zero credit checks because it's over collateralized. Is that me lining my own pockets? Yes, it is. So if we're lucky, then crypto assets simply end in a market crash and a series of progressive New Deal-like reforms to our financial system. Increased wealth inequality, populism, like Nazis, bullshit, Trump. I bet he writes about Trump. I bet he writes. He's probably like a leftist blog. What else does he write about? How to destroy Bitcoin. How to destroy Bitcoin. None of the compliance departments, like, it wouldn't destroy Bitcoin. Well, now, okay, so look at this. Shut down Wildcat equivalent stablecoins. We have fully backed cash equivalent stablecoins now with cash and short-term securities, which are regulated by the Treasury, USDC and Paxos. Also applying for bank licenses. Yeah. Anyways. Dude is some like progressive liberal who thinks that his like armchair declare any digital asset issued by U.S. companies as securities, ban the rest. All right, like this is just dumb, right? Because okay, when I buy stuff on NBA 2K or like Steam weapons or like weapons for Counter-Strike, are those digital assets? Yes, they are. Should they be considered securities? No. If I buy art that's a NFT, is that a security? No. No. So like he just is not, his myopic understanding of these markets now is very 2015. And you know, this is pseudo intellectual idiotic bullshit, and you just shouldn't listen to this. I mean, this Stephen Diehl dude, like, uh, what does he get out of it, right? The compute problem, the bandwidth problem, the storage problem. I mean, this dude's not even worth wasting the time. I don't even know why I made this dumb live stream, because all of this is dumb, right? Yeah. He just wants it all banned because he thinks it's all gambling. Yeah. Climate change. Bitcoin reduces climate change. I don't know. Anyways, I put my hands up. I've literally wasted 40 minutes of my life talking about this guy. Yeah, who the fuck cares? Honestly, I've had enough of this. Thank you for watching this live stream and uh, going through this article with me. It's not like this guy engages in any sort of like discussions because he has no basis to stand on. And if presented with any evidence by someone with a strong legal background or a more technical engineering background, he wouldn't have anything to say. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Sam, and see you again soon.